Hello, and welcome to Green Dragon, a monthly show where we talk about green initiatives in Maryland and Howard County, ongoing sustainability efforts at Howard Community College, and ideas and ways for you to be more sustainable at home. I'm Bob Marietta, HCC's Environmental Health and Safety Supervisor, and I thank you for watching today. My guest today is John McCoy, who until recently was the Watershed Manager for the Columbia Association. Before we go any further, John, can you give us your definition of a watershed and then explain what the role of a watershed manager is?
Well, Bob, first, let me thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure. And then to your question. So what's a watershed? A watershed is the land area that drains to a water body or a specific point within a drainage system. And what's the role of a watershed manager? Well, I suppose it can be a number of different things. For me, I was very lucky. I got hired by the Columbia Association to come work. They had a watershed management plan in place. The Columbia Association owns a fair amount of land here in Columbia. So, my role was to implement the plan, to work with Columbia Association's facilities, to work with residents in Columbia, and try to deal with stormwater runoff and water pollution issues.
So, John, when you think about Columbia, is it all in one watershed or lots of little ones?
Well, it's a whole lot of little watersheds that are sub-watersheds of both the Little Patuxent River and the Middle Patuxent River. And we, over towards Ellicott City, you start running into little watersheds that drain into the Patapsco River. So there are a number of watersheds here in Columbia.
I think that helps people understand what we're talking about. So, John, what was that key moment or moments in your childhood that set you on your path to be a watershed manager?
Well, when I was a kid, when I was a young fellow, I spent some time at my grandparents' farm in western North Carolina in the Smoky Mountains. And, that's a beautiful place. It's steep mountains, rural, very rural. And I think what kind of pushed me towards water pollution control issues was, there's a stream that ran down through that valley with Grandma's farm up on top of the mountain and my uncle's a little closer around the stream. And back in the 60s, there were still outhouses over the stream. And so, we'd go swimming and then we'd get out and have to pick the leeches off. And that kind of set me on a track towards working on water pollution issues.
Wow, that's really close and personal when you think about it that way. So John, talking to other people, is it true that you began working for the Columbia Association before you started your conservation career?
Absolutely. I think most folks in Columbia probably worked for the Columbia Association as kids in aquatics, and that's where I started. I got hired, I guess it had been 76, working as a lifeguard at the boat docks when CA used to run a boat rental at Lake Kittamaqundi. And when I first started, it was, 7 days a week, 24 hours a day.
Wow. Okay. It doesn't seem like, you look at the waterfront today down there, and it's hard to imagine, okay, that it was such an amenity in Columbia. We're so spoiled, I guess, now by having all the different pools and other places for recreation. But in the beginning, I guess that the lakefront was pretty much it, wasn't it?
Well, all the pools were there. I think that the lakefront was a big attraction, And, Merriweather, they had they did concerts that drew huge crowds, and they would, after the concert, come down to the lake. I think the concerts that still I remember are the Grateful Dead. When they came into town, we had people who would camp out down at lakefront overnight.
Wow. It's a bit of history there. Okay. So, John, I know you've worked with just about all of the local conservation organizations in Howard County, and I'm not going to list them all here since they'll probably all get their own chance to be on my podcast, and I'll talk to them then. But are you planning to continue working with any of them in particular now that you've retired?
Yes, absolutely. I will continue working with Weed Warriors as a volunteer with the Howard County Watershed Stewards Academy and with the Middle Patuxent Environmental Foundation.
You've made some organizations very happy, including me, working with the Weed Warriors. So I'm glad to know that you're still going to be on board. Okay. What was it about Maryland and specifically Columbia and Howard County that got you to stay and settle here in this area?
Well, I grew up in West Baltimore. My folks were involved in real estate out here. Dad at one point worked for the Rouse Company. So being in Columbia, I was frequently actually lived here with my grandmother for a while. And my wife grew up over in Faulkner Ridge. So it really wasn't so much coming and it was staying. And we bought in Clarksville back in the early 80s and raised our kids out here.
We're glad you did. So what has been your biggest success working with the Columbia Association and with the community?
Oh, I think there are three programs that resonate with me. Weed Warriors has developed into a very successful program. Our Rain Garden Cost Share program was very successful, and I particularly liked Test Your Lawn, where we were providing free soil samples for lawns for a while, try to help folks reduce phosphorus applications.
Particularly about that program, have you noticed people changing their habits about lawns and trying to grow with more native plants instead of just having grass everywhere?
Well, not so much with the native plants. What we were after was trying to reduce fertilizer applications, because of course phosphorus is runoff from lawns is a significant contributor to the algal problems we have in our lakes and ponds. And we did find that the majority of soils that we tested here in Columbia had adequate phosphorus, and we were able to pass that information on to homeowners and encourage them not to apply unnecessarily.
I know it made a big change in my yard care habits when you tested my lawn and gave me the levels of the pollutants that I had been putting on my lawn for years. And so I changed my habits, and I know a number of other people did as well. So kudos to you on that program, okay, as well as some of the others. So, John, what is your perception of the impact the development of Columbia and Howard County from the days of James Rouse and the development of the environmental and sustainability movements? Are we moving forward?
Well, I think that Columbia was an intelligently designed community. You'll notice that all of the streams, or the vast majority of the streams and floodplains, are in open space, either CA owned or county owned, or in some sort of public holding. So we unlike some of the other counties around us and some of the other communities around us, we don't have a lot of homes that are regularly flooded because they're in the floodplain. So I think in the design of the community, that was real smart. Now, as we're moving forward and having to deal with climate change and having to try to retrofit our community, since so much of it was built before we really had adequate stormwater management, I think that movement forward's a little slower.
Yeah. Have you noticed an impact to the lead building requirements, at least with the larger buildings in the county? Are people being a little more conscious?
Absolutely. Yes. The compliance with them and the interest in complying with them to gain that status, I think has been commendable.
Well, John, I know from teaching Weed Warrior classes with you that you particularly don't like invasive vines. Well, any vines at all, really. But what invasive plant would you say is really your most hated species?
Well, with respect to the vines, it's honeysuckle. It's just everywhere, in the trees, on the ground. It's a pervasive ground cover. In my view, it's destructive. And, from the standpoint where if you like going out and pulling non-native invasives, it's real easy to find.
I know we do spend a lot of time with the Weed Warrior classes, working on that one in particular. And so I encourage anybody listening, go out and grab some honeysuckle and follow it, get all the root, okay? Because it'll come growing back if you just pull the top part off. John, lately there's been a lot of discussion and disagreement about stream restoration and its impact on the environment compared with the potential damage caused by increased runoff brought on by climate change. Can the desires of homeowners who like their view sheds along the old farm drainage ditches be balanced with the stormwater management requirements of the state and federal government agencies?
Well, I think to balance the two, there are going to have to be some compromises and some trade-offs. First, I'm not thoroughly convinced that most folks really comprehend how much space is needed to retrofit the built communities that were built before '85 when the stormwater requirements came in. And second, I'm not sure just how readily accepted that is going to be, because most of the property out there is privately owned. Businesses, homeowners, stormwater facilities take space, which means that whatever you're doing with that space now would have to change. And I'm not sure how readily that's going to be accepted. I guess what I would view is, Columbia is 40, 50 years old. And we've been working on retrofitting for 10, 15 years, maybe longer now. And we've only made so much progress with that. So, that's a tough one. That's going to require compromise and trade-offs.
Yeah, really. Yeah. And recently, Howard County Council declined to pass legislation requiring the renovation projects to follow their new forestry guidelines, which would have had a serious economic impact on any restoration work that we were planning for. But even if we don't follow those guidelines totally about preserving larger trees in totality, can we realistically, expect renovation companies, stream restoration companies, to try and provide more respect, I guess, for the view shed of the homeowners? I know we're working in the winter when the ground is frozen, might require removal of fewer trees, but still we're impacting have to be impacting things that people are going to be seeing out their back windows. So is there any
Right.
happy medium in there that you can see?
A happy medium. I don't know about the happy side of it. As I said, I think there's some compromises. I think that stream restoration projects and, well, stormwater management facility construction, they're construction projects, and construction sites are generally not very attractive. As far as respecting established growth, working around it, yes, there are methods that can be used, corridors into and through forested areas to get where you need to work. The trade-offs are, so you do a stream restoration, you are going to remove some trees, some vegetation, and you need to get plant material back in there that'll grow. And it grows better when there's more sunlight. You can get faster growth. So sometimes when you're trying to plant and you've done a really good job of preserving trees and whatnot, you're planting material in a much shadier condition, and it's not going to grow as well or as fast. So, there's a compromise in there. And then there's a factor in this that we have to kind of think about that I don't think we're doing a great job managing. Deer have a tremendous impact on our forest. They browse seedlings, they browse small trees, and when you're trying to bring trees up through that browse and the fall buck rub, where they're rubbing the felt off their horns, that can be really difficult. And there's a couple of things that we see going on. They and you see this in our forest in general. Deer don't like to eat sycamore trees. They don't like to eat beech trees. They don't particularly like the sweet gums. And you see those trees coming in as the replacement and the young growth in areas where we may have in the past had tulip poplars and oaks being part of the regrowth. So there are a whole bunch of factors other than the construction itself that influence how well these restoration projects or any vegetation reforestation project work.
John, I know the county has a lot of effort, and the state does too, and put into deer control. And they've tried things, the sharpshooters, just eliminating the deer in the parklands. And there have been some attempts at the birth control, rubbing stations being installed. But is the Columbia Association, have they looked into doing any of these programs, or should they?
I believe the Columbia Association will, as it has in the past, work with Howard County, and would very much like Howard County to manage the handling of hunters. I don't believe that CA is really, equipped to be involved in that. We have in the past opened up sections of open space next to areas where the county was running managed hunts. And I think that worked fairly well. It didn't include a lot of open space, but my guess is that's the mechanism that we should be working with. We should work with the county's existing programs.
Yeah, we wish them luck with that. And I know the managed hunt programs continue, and there's a lot of feeling about protecting Bambi, that you hear from people talk about, that don't like the hunts going on. But the wasting disease, if we don't try and control the numbers of deer, is so horrible to see. I've seen some footage of the deer that have been suffering okay, from that. And so I'd encourage CA to do whatever they can to cooperate with the county. Do you know, did the birth control experiments do any good?
Yeah, there was a study up, I believe, at Cornell that really indicated that what birth control did was it instead of the does becoming pregnant, they stayed open, and the bucks saw it as the does remaining open and in heat. And if I'm not mistaken, the results of that study indicated that the deer population went up a little bit because the does attracted more bucks.
Wow.
And I guess I'd add to that. Okay. One of the things we have to think about, and you talked a little bit about it with chronic wasting, but the deer affect a lot of things. They affect human health, and that's Lyme disease, that's car accidents. The chronic wasting, as of yet, has not been demonstrated to move from deer to humans, but there are other prion-based diseases like chronic wasting that have. And this is something we're going to have to be careful about. And the other thing that they do, the heavy deer browse changes the understory in our forests so much that really affects the birds. There are some pretty good papers out indicating that the lack of understory because of the severe deer browse really impacts the migratory songbirds.
Well, something else to think about. So, John, I know you mentioned several of the local organizations that you're going to be continuing to work with, but now that you're not going to have to go into the office every day, what are you going to do with your time? You going to take up fishing or golf, or what you going to be doing, man?
Well, I do like to do a little fishing, but you know, my one of my main interests is I like working with plants, and at home I've got room to work with, the vegetable garden, and I have some fairly extensive plant gardens, native plant gardens, and I'm going to work with them more.
Well, I hope you can enjoy it. Well, we've reached the end of our show. Thank you, John, for fascinating sharing of your life and your perspective on things. I'll be back next month with another guest and sustainable topic. In the meantime, if you have ideas or comments, you can connect with me at rmarietta@howardcc.edu. You can listen to this and all of our other podcasts at dragonpodcast.podbeam.com. And you can also tune in to the college's YouTube channel. Okay.
Well, Bob,
don't forget
to
much. Share. Oh, thank you, John. Yeah, so don't forget to share, like, comment, and let others know to join us and help us take care of our world, because every small step each of us can take can have a great impact when we all impact together. Thank you.